Alright guys, so over the last 6 months, I've covered some pretty humiliating interviews with top Israeli government spokespeople, but this one that we're about to watch, I think probably takes the cake. Now I want to give a shout out to the journalist and what exactly his name is. It's Yama Wolasmal. Okay, he is an Afghan-born Norwegian journalist, and he is pressing this guy, the UK Israeli government spokesperson, David Mencer. Okay, and I'm usually pretty critical of especially Western mainstream media outlets and journalists, with some notable exceptions, who generally don't really come prepared with facts to these kinds of conversations, and they don't really know how to push back on standard pro-Israel talking points that we hear over and over and over again. But this guy, it's a textbook case of what journalism is supposed to look like. So let's go ahead and jump into this and we'll commentate our way through it.
Military offensive into Rafah will end in a slaughter, the UN warns. Tell us, how are you going to evacuate all these people?
In the same way that we've done in the past.
That didn't work very well. You told people to move to what was a safe zone, then your forces would end up bombing that area. Are you going to follow the same formula?
So again, I think that's a misrepresentation of this war. We're after Hamas. We've got no problem with ordinary Gazans. I won't be sharing with you our battle plans. They're being discussed right now.
I'm not asking about the battle plan, Mr. Mencer.
So
I'm asking, how are you going to evacuate 1.4 million people out of Rafah?
We will do the same as we've done in other parts of this harsh military war. We move people out of harm's way. We've already acquired, there's been multiple reports of shelters which have been acquired, safe zones where people can move to.
We've also seen people with white flags in plain sight being shot by your forces. We've also seen people in so-called safe zones being bombed. So we've seen your forces kill people on the run from your bombs as well over the past 6 months.
So again, I would say to you that we feel we are the most humane army which has ever existed in living memory. We've done more to protect civilian lives.
I mean, what do you even say? Is this not, I mean, even from a pro-Israel perspective, is this really the kind of argument you want to go with? Is this is the most convincing case that you can make? So David Mencer, right, he's asked a very simple question. How are you going to ensure that Israel's upcoming invasion of Rafah is going to account for the over 1 million civilians who have been crammed down there because you guys have obliterated the rest of the Gaza Strip? How are you going to do that? Are you going to evacuate them? What is your plan? And his response to that is to say, the plan is we're going to do what we've been doing. I'm sorry, as this journalist points out there, we have gotten story after story after story since the beginning of this war after October 7th of Israel telling people, go to this location, that's a safe zone, and then they bomb them as they're trying to go to that safe zone, and then also continue bombing the end point of where that safe zone is. I just talked about yesterday in my video, there was a new analysis that was done by a mainstream US outlet, which is about 6 months behind the story, but still, they did an investigation and found in, I think it was over 7 different examples, just recently over the last couple of months, that Israel has bombed places, even in Rafah and other places in Gaza that they have deemed to be safe zones. They've done this over and over and over again, on top of obviously bombing and attacking hospitals and churches and mosques and schools and UN shelters and refugee camps and everything else you could possibly imagine. There is no world in which a reasonable person who understands the facts of what Israel has been doing to Gaza over the last 6 months could possibly come to the conclusion that they are the most moral army in the world. They are one of, if not the single least moral army on the face of the planet right now. They are engaging in an active genocide. So like, again, it's one thing if you were to try to make the argument of like, well, it's really difficult and it's complicated because Hamas is everywhere and blah, blah, blah. That's one thing to kind of make the lazy human shields defense argument. But to say you're the most moral army on the planet is just like laughable at face value. So it's bizarre that they keep making this argument as if it's going to convince anyone. But anyways, we continue here.
Where there have been, Yama, this is important. Let me share with you.
You even shot your own hostages.
Right.
That came
so
out
where
running
there have
alive,
been
waved flags, and your soldiers
extremely terrible occurrence that was.
So how are people in
where
Gaza
we have
supposed to
made
feel
mistakes?
Safe? How are they supposed
where
to
we
feel
have
safe?
made mistakes, we investigate, we wait for those results, and we adjust our behavior accordingly. That's what democracies do.
1 week into the war, your army...
That's what democracies do. First off, you can't be an apartheid and a democracy at the same time. That's number one, okay? Number two, we know the facts about how you guys ended up shooting your own hostages, right? They shot 3 of their own hostages who were shouting in Hebrew and waving white flags, as he just pointed out there, all right? This is not a complicated situation. What happened here, in all likelihood, is that the IDF was operating as they have been with the standard operating procedure of any male, especially, who is a military-aged male, right, or they're between the ages of, I guess, like 14 and 40 or whatever the case may be. They operate with the standard that we are going to assume that they are Hamas. We are going to assume that they are terrorists, that they are militants, that they are a threat. And so they establish these kill zones. We've talked about that reporting before on this channel. They establish these kill zones in which they basically just deem anybody in the surrounding area to be a Hamas militant by default, right? And so that's how you end up killing your own hostages, is when your soldiers are so trigger happy to shoot anybody who comes into their eye line that you end up killing your own fucking hostages. He has no excuse for that. And of course, the only go-to line is, well, we're a democracy. No, you're not. And we hold our own accountable. We do thorough investigations and we change course. No, you don't. How many investigations has the U.S. government, all of these State Department ghouls, Matthew Miller, Patel, the rest of them, they come out over and over and over again for months at a time. Where's the investigation on Hind Rajab's murder and then the follow-up murder of the ambulance that tried to go and rescue her that was coordinating with the IDF at the time? Where's the investigation conclusion into that? What about on the Flower Massacre, right? How many investigations do we need to pile up on top of each other before people realize they're not doing investigations or anything remotely close to a serious investigation, and they're certainly not sharing an honest result of that investigation with the world, and they're certainly not prosecuting their own soldiers for war crimes that have been committed inside of Gaza. The worst that you may get is like, we're going to reassign this IDF soldier to a different group or something like that. There's never any accountability, but he continues here.
Spokesperson Daniel Hagari showed the world a virtual 3D model of an alleged Hamas command and control center, which stretched several stories beneath the largest medical facility in Gaza, the Shifa hospital, which you know very well of. Why haven't you shown any proof of such a command center?
Again, Yama, this really line of questioning really shocks us here in Israel, because we've shown the world media, many journalists have been taken to those tunnels. We've seen those bulletproof doors. We've seen the cells.
No, specifically with Shifa Hospital, what you've shown the world are abandoned tunnels and shafts and weapons your forces claim were found inside the hospital. That does not prove that Hamas had a 3-story underground command and control center under the Shifa, a claim Israel has used to justify the attacks on hospitals all over the Gaza Strip.
I'm quite disappointed at this line of questioning, and it's not just from you, because we face this unreasonable burden of proof of the horrors of Hamas strategies. We've shown you tunnels.
Hamas has never denied they had tunnels under Gaza. That's an open secret. But you're claiming that they had a command center under the biggest hospital in Gaza. You use that as an argument to lay that hospital in ruins, and that's why it's a question the international press has to ask you. Where is this command center under the Shifa hospital?
Asking questions is, of course, the right thing to do for any journalist, but we have produced evidence of terror tunnels underneath the hospital. I apologize, Yama, if it's not enough for you. I apologize for the fact that we found RPGs in an intensive care unit. I apologize for the fact that we were fired on from the maternity ward. And I can tell you one thing, it wasn't the midwives that were firing at us. We know we've killed at least 13,000.
Okay, we'll continue there. But again, I want to commend this journalist. Right now, honestly, this is how every single journalist should be acting in these kinds of conversations with Israeli government officials. But, you know, he still does deserve credit, because this is one of the toughest interviews that I've seen in a long time. And it really is only tough because he knows the basic facts of the story surrounding Al-Shifa. Now, you guys remember that animation that he was referring to there, where the official government of Israel, the official, State of Israel account on Twitter was posting this image. They were circulating it around. It showed this massive, sprawling, complex Hamas command and control center underneath Al-Shifa. And that never materialized. And so that's his question. Is like, you just destroyed Al-Shifa Hospital. I mean, it looks like it's completely in ruins. The surrounding blocks around Al-Shifa Hospital were also destroyed. The roads were dug up. The hospital has burn marks and explosive, remnants all over it. You rendered this hospital and many other hospitals inside of Gaza, inoperable for the justification that there was a massive Hamas command and control center underneath. And the journalist's question there is like, where is the evidence for this? Because the only evidence Israel ended up providing was that there were tunnels underneath Al-Shifa, right? There are tunnels underneath everywhere in Gaza. There are tunnels all over the place. As you pointed out there, that's not a secret. Nobody is denying that that Gaza has tunnels or that Hamas uses tunnels. That was never the question here. And so they come out, their evidence that they provide is like abandoned tunnels that there's no evidence that Hamas militants were even recently in, and then they lay out a couple of weapons on a mat after the fact and say this is what we found here without demonstrating that they actually found them there. It's just like the shoddiest evidence that you could possibly imagine. And then he has the audacity to get offended that this journalist is skeptical of that. He's like, these questions are like really alarming to us here in Israel. I mean, this is just the baseline. This is not a higher standard that's being imposed on Israel. This is just basic journalism. Of course, you should not trust the Israeli government, or any government for that matter. You shouldn't trust Hamas's claims either without looking into them. You shouldn't trust any official source's claims without actually getting the evidence for what justifies that claim being made, especially for Israel when they have been demonstrable liars, caught over and over and over again on so many different things, not just since October 7th, but well before that as well. They're not reliable narrators. They're not reliable sources of information. So of course you should be questioning. And this guy's best defense is like, well, we already showed you the evidence, pretty much. That's his justification for Israel obliterating the hospital system inside of Gaza.
Terrorists, armed terrorists. I remind you again.
How do you know that you've killed 13,000 terrorists?
Because they were firing at us.
That's interesting because yesterday in my video, we talked about the mayor of Jerusalem, the deputy mayor of Jerusalem, who was in an interview and claimed that she knew for 100% certain that they had killed 15,000 Hamas terrorists. Now, he says he's 100% certain it's actually 13,000 terrorists. Which one is it? Who the fuck knows? It's an arbitrary number. Let's listen here.
So did you do a head count?
Yes.
So this is a verifiable fact according to you.
I don't say that we have their lists, I don't say we have their names, but we have killed 13,000 combatants.
Yes, but it's just a number, Mr. Mencer. It's just a number. We have never seen any concrete proof that backs up this number.
So I'm a spokesman for this government. I'm a spokesman for this government and the Israeli people. And I'll tell you right now that we have killed 13,000 terrorists. We have executed the gold standard when it comes to firing and directing our war at the terrorists and getting civilians out of harm's way.
You say you've set the gold standard. Your critics would say Israel is waging a genocidal war, according to UN experts. Israel finds itself in the docks in the International Criminal Court of Justice, which says there is plausible reason to believe genocide is being committed in Gaza. The EU says Israel is using starvation as a weapon against 2.2 million Gazans. It doesn't really sound like a gold standard.
So let me take those apart because there's a lot in that question which you just asked. On genocide, I would point you to the fact that a genocide was committed against my people, indiscriminate killing against my people. We, the Jewish people, we recognize evil when we see it. We've been very, very clear that it's a terrible war, it's a dangerous war. We've lost 606 of our soldiers in this war, but this country is united on its war aims, and we will be successful because, we don't have anywhere else to go in this country. There is only one Jewish state in the entire world.
And WHO.
Okay. So first off, the 13,000 number, again, this is, as he just admitted there, just a claim. He literally just devolves into saying, well, I'm an Israeli government spokesperson and this is what my government is saying, so that's why I provided that number. And again, we have the reporting that the IDF will kill civilians and then just label them as terrorists, Hamas members, militants after the fact. So that number is not reliable. It also doesn't track with any of the other numbers that are reliable that we're getting in terms of the amount of civilians who have been killed, the percentage that have been women and children. The math does not add up for that 15,000 or 13,000 number. Now, regardless, the main point there is he actually just tried to claim that they have been operating with the gold standard in terms of targeting terrorists and not getting civilians. It's a perfect response there from this journalist to just simply bring up some of the things that Israel is going through right now. He didn't even bring this up, but there's currently pending warrants coming from the International Criminal Court against Benjamin Netanyahu and the Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, okay, as well as Haveli, I believe. So not only do you have impending International Criminal Court warrants coming your way, but you're also, as he pointed out there, facing an ongoing genocide case at the International Court of Justice. So this is what I don't understand about these talking points is like, if you didn't already agree with David Mencer's position here, then all of this just looks ridiculous, right? If you didn't already fully buy into the Israeli narrative on all of this, then this looks absurd. You can't, as you're in the middle of an ICJ genocide case, come out and say you're using the gold standard of military warfare. It's so far in the opposite direction of a gold standard that you're facing cases from the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice at the same time. That's like, that in and of itself is an achievement in terms of brutality towards civilians. It takes a lot for the ICJ to rule that it's plausible that a genocide is underway, especially against Israel, that is being, backed and given diplomatic cover from the most powerful country in the world, the United States of America. I mean, that is a challenge to do that. So again, credit to this journalist for, knowing the basics and pushing him on this. And again, the defense, I mean, what does he resort to here? Like, we are the government of Israel, we are moral, this is what democracies do. It's just like buzzwords on repeat from this guy. He can't actually respond to the ICJ case. He can't respond to what humanitarian organizations are saying or what the United Nations is saying. He just deflects every single time. And he's going to do that again as we get more so into the end of this interview.
And WHO says the figures from the Gaza Health Ministry, Hamas's health ministry, are reliable, that they even passed international scrutiny in previous wars. In fact, if you look up the numbers, in the wars in 2014 and 2021, Israel's and Hamas's casualty numbers were almost identical. Why would suddenly they lie in this current crisis and war?
The health ministry does not differentiate between a civilian combatant, which is a tragedy, we say that very, very clearly, and a terrorist.
Notice how he just said civilian combatant? Let me just rewind that real quick.
Say that very, very clearly, and a terrorist.
In this current crisis and war.
The health ministry does not differentiate between a civilian combatant, which is a tragedy, we say that very, very clearly, and a terrorist. We do.
The UN says these numbers coming from the Hamas.
Again, it's so funny. We do, but the Gaza Health Ministry doesn't. First off, if anything, the numbers coming from the Gaza Ministry of Health, which, as this journalist just pointed out there, have been demonstrated to be reliable in the past by the United States, by Israel, by international organizations, the numbers that are coming out from the Gaza Health Ministry are, if anything, an undercount. They don't count the amount of people who are stuck under the rubble and could be presumed dead, which at this point could be as much as like 5,000 to 8,000 people who are stuck under the rubble. It also doesn't count other factors that are at play. For example, how many people had some underlying condition or disease or illness that needed to be treated that now can't be treated because Israel obliterated the healthcare system inside of Gaza. I mean, there are so many different tangential things. How many people have died as a result of disease from this war? How many people have died from starvation? A lot of these numbers are extremely difficult to count when the way that the Gaza Health Ministry counts their figures is from reports and from the amount of people who go through their healthcare system. So again, if anything, those numbers are an undercount. All right, but he seems to think, they're not reliable. Let's see how he finishes this.
Hamas Health Ministry are reliable. There's no reason to doubt them because several times this health ministry during this war has published long lists of names where you have the ID number, their names. Detailed lists have been published documenting who has been killed inside the Gaza Strip during this war. You claim you've killed 13,000 Hamas fighters, yet you haven't produced any lists whatsoever. No documentation. It's a number you're giving the world.
It's a number which our army has given to us. in a democratic country with checks and balances, with media scrutiny, with all the Western values that Norway holds dear or should hold dear.
Well, Mr. Mencer, I ask you again, where is the concrete proof that you've killed 13,000 fighters? Okay, you claim it, but where is the proof? At least Hamas's health ministry has published lists confirming who has died several times.
I wouldn't take Hamas's word for anything, literally anything.
So we shouldn't believe Hamas, we shouldn't believe the UN, the World Health Organizations, all the aid groups on the ground, rights groups from all over the world. We shouldn't believe them, we should believe the Israeli government.
You'll excuse me if I feel extremely skeptical about almost anything which comes out of the United Nations. We are a proud member of the United Nations. Our officials express our beliefs in the United Nations, and we defend ourselves as is the right thing to do.
Okay. So, I mean, there you go, guys. It's the same shit. It's the same talking points over and over and over again on repeat. Now, the way that he finishes off there really just encapsulates all of it. He's pressed on what is your actual evidence, right? And his response is basically just to lean back on, we're a democracy, we share Western values, which is pretty much a dog whistle there is what we're witnessing. He's saying, we are Western culturally, as a society, we are Western, we have the same values as you, we're not like those Arab savages, so you should trust us without needing any evidence. That's what he's saying here at the end of the day. He's saying, trust us at face value, even though we've been proven to be demonstrable liars and non-credible sources of information over and over again. He's saying, just trust us at face value. But don't trust the United Nations because they're Hamas. Don't trust the Gaza Health Ministry because they're Hamas, even though their numbers have been proven to be accurate in previous wars before. So don't trust the UN. Don't trust the Gaza Ministry of Health. Don't trust any humanitarian aid organizations around the world because they're also Hamas. Don't trust anybody except for the Israeli government. That's what his conclusion is there. So again, huge shout out. I'll pull out his name once again. Yama Wolasmal. Shout out to you, Yama. Fantastic job. This is what journalism looks like. Okay? And again, it's really nothing special. He's good at his job, but it shouldn't be anything special. This shouldn't be a video that I'm making where I'm like, wow, look at this journalist actually know his facts, know the baseline information, know the talking points, and just ask basic follow-up questions and not allow them to dodge questions with bullshit buzzwords that they float around about Western society versus darkness and democracy, etc. So shout out to you. Great job. And hopefully U.S. journalists can learn a little bit from this.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying